They didn't invade Earth. They didn't threaten extinction. They smiled and sold us garbage. Before the story begins, do one thing. If you enjoy stories where humanity is underestimated, humiliated, and written off by the galaxy only to rise in ways no one expects like the video, subscribe to the channel and stay until the end. Because what Earth did with broken ships didn't just change a war. It changed who the galaxy feared. You still remember the moment the stars went quiet, not because space changed, but because the galaxy stopped taking Earth seriously. First contact wasn't violent. It was polite, cold, transactional. The Galactic Trade Assembly appeared above the United Earth Council chamber as a ring of shimmering holograms, tall figures, inhuman symmetry, eyes that looked at you the way engineers look at outdated tools. "Congratulations, Earth," the lead negotiator said smoothly. "Your species has been approved for limited defensive militarization." Approved, as if survival required permission. They knew your situation. Everyone did. Humanity had cracked faster than light travel only recently. Your colonies were scattered, fragile, and poorly defended. Pirates stalked the outer systems. Unaligned powers tested your borders with probing incursions. So when the Assembly offered help, you listened. A used interstellar defense fleet, patrol cruisers, escorts, light carriers, all fully spaceworthy. The price was steep trade concessions, mineral rights, political alignment, but extinction was more expensive. You signed. 3 months later, the fleet arrived. From orbit, it was magnificent. Dozens of alien warships slipping out of hyperspace above Earth, scarred but imposing, ancient hulls catching the sun. Humanity watched in awe. News feeds erupted. Crowds filled the streets. For the first time, Earth looked like it belonged among the stars. You weren't cheering. You were standing in Dock 7 when the first cruiser's maneuvering thrusters failed, and the ship nearly tore itself apart trying to dock. The inspections were worse. Reactors misaligned just enough to destabilize under combat load. Shield emitters tuned to obsolete frequencies useless against modern weapons. Targeting systems written in dead software languages no one supported anymore. And the hulls patched with alloys that hadn't been manufactured in centuries. You opened maintenance panels and found counterfeit certifications, stress fractures hidden beneath cosmetic plating, safety limiters welded permanently in place. This wasn't surplus. It was scrap. Earth filed a formal protest. The response came fast and public. A galaxy-wide broadcast. The same negotiator, smiling wider now, standing before the Assembly. Earth received exactly what was contracted, they said calmly. Operational vessels, previously decommissioned. No warranty implied. Then they laughed. The chamber laughed. The galaxy laughed. Frankly, the negotiator added, we are impressed your species believed otherwise. Humanity didn't scream. Humanity didn't threaten. Humanity went silent. Because when you grow up fixing broken machines, salvaging what others throw away, and surviving on systems never meant to last, you don't see a broken fleet. You see potential. And somewhere deep inside those rusted hulls and sabotaged systems, humanity found something the galaxy had forgotten. This wasn't a gift. It was a mistake. Hey everyone, still here, still awake. If you are, that's fine, because this is the part where the galaxy stops laughing and starts checking its locks. The galaxy assumed Earth would complain, maybe threaten arbitration, then quietly accept its place at the bottom. That's how things usually went. Young species didn't retaliate. They adapted or disappeared. What they didn't understand was that humanity had never been given things that worked in the first place. You didn't grow up with perfect systems. You grew up repairing engines held together by faith and duct tape, running infrastructure beyond its rated lifespan, repurposing civilian tech for military survival. Earth wasn't built on pristine design. It was built on fixing other people's failures. So when the Assembly's broken fleet was towed into human shipyards, the mood wasn't despair. It was curiosity. Engineers, physicists, materials experts, and AI architects poured into the docks, not to restore the ships to their original specifications, but to understand why they were broken so precisely. Because sabotage leaves fingerprints. You found them everywhere. Reactor inefficiencies that only mattered under combat acceleration. Power routing bottlenecks that limited peak output, but kept systems nominal during inspections. Weapon capacitors tuned just low enough to fail against modern shields. Hull stress tolerances calculated to fracture after sustained fire, not before. It was elegant, cruel, and utterly dependent on one assumption: that humans would try to make the ships as they were meant to be. You didn't. You tore out entire subsystems. The first doctrine came quietly, unofficially, scribbled on whiteboards and whispered between shipyard teams. Stop restoring. Start reinventing. Alien reactor cores were stripped down to raw principles, then rebuilt with human safety margins, which were, frankly, insane by galactic standards. Where alien engineers optimized for efficiency, humans optimized for abuse. You didn't ask, "Is this safe?" You asked, "How much punishment can this take before it fails?" Then you doubled it. Shield emitters were recalibrated, not to match standard frequencies, but to drift unpredictably across spectra, sloppy by alien logic, devastating in practice. Targeting systems were rewritten from scratch. Integrated with human combat A is trained not on simulations, but on historical human warfare. Dirty, chaotic, adaptive. Weapons that didn't just fire, they learned. And the hulls. The galaxy would have cried had seen what you did to the hulls. You replaced brittle alien alloys with layered composite plating, scavenged, hybridized, imperfect. No two ships were rebuilt exactly the same. Variance wasn't a flaw. It was a feature. By the time the first refit was complete, the ship barely resembled its original blueprint. It looked wrong. Asymmetrical reinforcements. External conduits. Non-standard weapon mounts bolted where no alien designer would ever allow them. But when you powered it up, the reactor didn't hum. It roared. The first test jump nearly tore the docking clamps out of the station. Not because the drive was unstable, but because it had more thrust than the hull had ever been designed to handle. You reinforced it again and again. Earth didn't announce what it was doing. There were no broadcasts, no protests, no threats. The Assembly saw nothing but silence and assumed compliance. Pirates made the same mistake. The first engagement happened at the edge of the Kestrel expanse. A small pirate flotilla, modern ships, confident, armed with weapons calibrated perfectly against outdated alien hulls. They expected an easy kill. What they found was a human cruiser that refused to die. Their opening salvo should have gutted it. Instead, the shields flared, shifted frequencies mid-impact, and held. The cruiser accelerated far beyond expected limits, closed the distance, and fired weapons that didn't behave like any pirate had ever seen. The targeting AI adapted within seconds, rewriting firing solutions on the fly. Point defense cannons tracked targets through electronic warfare like it wasn't even there. The pirate flagship tried to flee. The human cruiser overclocked its engines, a maneuver the original design would have torn itself apart attempting, and ran the pirate down. The battle lasted 4 minutes. No human casualties. The wreckage was educational. Word spread fast in the underlayers of galactic space. Whispers of wrong ships and angry humans circulated among smugglers and raiders. Most dismissed it as exaggeration. The assembly didn't even notice. They noticed when Earth stopped losing territory. Then when Earth patrols began pushing outward. Then when a human task group rebuilt scrap ships bristling with unauthorized modifications, crossed into neutral space, and politely informed a pirate cartel that their operations were over permanently. The cartel laughed. They didn't laugh for long. Reports flooded assembly intelligence channels. Inconsistent data, impossible performance metrics. Ships that didn't match known profiles, fighting styles that broke predictive models. Analysts blamed sensor errors. Admirals blamed incompetence. No one blamed the fleet, because that would mean admitting the scam had backfired. By the time the assembly convened an emergency review, Earth had already finished refitting the entire fleet. Not into a standardized force, but into something far more dangerous. A doctrine built on adaptability, redundancy, and controlled madness. Every ship could fight independently. Every system had manual overrides. Every crew was trained to expect failure and exploit it. Human captains were encouraged to improvise, to break rules, to weaponize chaos. The galaxy's war doctrines prized order. Humanity brought entropy. The first official confrontation came when an assembly inspection force entered human-controlled space. Demanding compliance audits, they expected submission. What they got was a demonstration. One ship, just one. A former patrol cruiser, now designated under a human naming convention that translated roughly to unreasonable persistence. They ordered it to power down. It didn't. They threatened sanctions. It advanced. They fired a warning shot. The human ship responded by absorbing the hit, analyzing the weapon's frequency, and returning fire through a shield gap the alien designers themselves had insisted was impossible. The inspection force withdrew. The galaxy went quiet again. Not with laughter this time, with calculation. Because the truth was starting to sink in. The assembly hadn't sold Earth broken ships. They had sold Earth raw material. And humanity had done what it always did best. They took what was never meant to work and made it unstoppable. And somewhere in the halls of the Galactic Trade Assembly, someone finally asked the question they should have asked at the beginning. What happens, they whispered, when the species we tried to cheat decides to stop fixing and starts conquering? That answer was already on its way. Hey, everyone still here? Still awake? If you are, that's fine. Because this is the part where the galaxy finally understands what it did wrong. The Galactic Trade Assembly did what it always did when a problem refused to behave. It escalated confidently, publicly, and with paperwork already written for the aftermath. They called it a compliance operation. In reality, it was a message. A sanctioned battle group assembled at the edge of human space. Pristine cruisers, modern carriers, weapon systems calibrated to the latest galactic standards. Admirals who had never lost a war stood on immaculate bridges and reviewed projections that ended the same way every time. Human ships were unpredictable, yes, dangerous in small numbers perhaps, but disorder always collapsed when faced with overwhelming order. That was the theory. The assembly transmitted its ultimatum across every open channel. Earth was to stand down, submit its fleet for inspection, and accept corrective oversight. Failure would result in enforced demilitarization and economic isolation. They gave you 12 hours. Humanity answered in 6 words. We acknowledge receipt. Proceed. No threats, no defiance, just an open invitation. The assembly fleet crossed the border at dawn by Earth time. They expected resistance at choke points. They expected layered defenses, minefields, maybe a desperate ambush. Instead, they found space, empty, quiet, unchallenged. Scouts pushed forward. Sensors strained. Nothing. Admirals relaxed. That was mistake number 1. The first human contact wasn't a battle group. It was a single ship drifting near a gas giant, transponder active, weapons cold. The profile didn't match any known human class because it didn't match anything. The assembly commander ordered a standard scan. The scan returned nonsense. Power readings spiked and vanished. Shield harmonics fluctuated without pattern. Weapon ports appeared, disappeared, then appeared somewhere else entirely. The commander frowned. Interference? No, sir, the sensor officer replied slowly. It's doing that on purpose. The human ship transmitted a short message. Just checking your math. And it fired. Not at the fleet. At space itself. A localized gravity distortion loomed between the assembly formation, a weaponized byproduct of overdriven human FTL physics. The fleet's perfect formation fractured instantly as ships were shoved off vector, collision alarms screaming. And then humanity arrived, not in a line, not in ranks. They came from everywhere. Human ships dropped out of FTL inside tolerances no sane alien doctrine would allow. Some arrived missing external plating, others trailing radiation, one visibly on fire and still accelerating. Each ship fought differently. One overloaded its shields until they became weapons, ramming straight through an assembly destroyer and detonating on the far side. Reactor venting outward in a controlled kill zone. Another vented atmosphere deliberately, using the expanding plasma to blind targeting sensors before launching unguided kinetic rounds at point-blank range. Assembly targeting computers failed. They couldn't predict ships that didn't behave consistently, not even with themselves. Human captains ignored damage reports that would have triggered retreat protocols in any other fleet. Crews rerouted power manually, crawling through half-lit corridors, slamming physical switches that alien designers had removed centuries ago. Where assembly doctrine prized preservation of assets, human doctrine prized momentum. If a ship could still move, it could still kill. The battle spread across the system, not as a single engagement, but as dozens of overlapping catastrophes. Assembly carriers tried to deploy fighters only to discover human point defense systems didn't prioritize targets. They erased everything in range. Fighters, missiles, debris, sometimes friendly drones. Clean battles were a luxury humanity had never been able to afford. So they fought dirty. A human frigate, hull breached and bleeding atmosphere, latched on to an assembly cruiser and physically boarded it, not with troops, but with hacking spikes fired directly into the enemy ship's data core. Alien systems designed for isolation and safety collapsed when faced with human code that assumed failure and exploited it. The cruiser went dark, then turned its guns on its own fleet. The assembly commander ordered retreat. Half the fleet didn't respond. By the time the survivors escaped into hyperspace, the compliance operation was over, and the galaxy had changed. The aftermath was worse than the battle. Footage leaked. Sensor data leaked. Survivor testimonies leaked contradicting each other in ways that terrified analysts. Human ships that shouldn't have survived. Weapons that weren't supposed to exist. Tactics that violated every known rule of engagement. The assembly tried to control the narrative. They failed. Because pirates stopped operating near human space entirely. Because neutral systems began quietly requesting human advisors. Because assembly member states started upgrading their defenses not against invasion, but against humans. And then Earth made its move, not with fleets, with contracts. Human engineers offered refit services to non-assembly worlds, fixing broken infrastructure, upgrading obsolete defenses, improving ships others had written off as scrap. They didn't demand allegiance, just access. Shipyards filled with hybrid designs. Human logic spread through alien systems. Manual overrides returned. Redundancy replaced elegance. The assembly watched its technological monopoly dissolve, not through theft, but through generosity. That terrified them more than any battle. They summoned Earth to a formal hearing. This time, humanity attended in person. No holograms. A single human representative stood before the assembly chamber small, unarmored, hands empty. You violated the accords, the lead negotiator said, voice tight. You weaponized defective assets, the human smiled. You sold us broken ships, they replied calmly. We fixed them. You destabilized galactic order. You scammed a species you didn't understand. The chamber erupted in argument. The human waited. When silence returned, they spoke one final time. You thought we were buying protection, they said. We were buying lessons. They turned to leave. At the door, they paused. Oh, and for the record, the human added, without looking back. We're not conquering the galaxy. The assembly exhaled in relief. We're just making sure, the human finished, that no one like you ever runs it again. The doors closed. Human fleets didn't occupy worlds. They didn't install governors. They did something far more disruptive. They made the galaxy resilient. And in doing so, they made organizations built on exploitation obsolete. The broken fleet, once a joke, became a legend. A reminder whispered in shipyards and council halls alike. Never sell humanity what you think is useless, because humans don't see broken things as failures. They see them as beginnings. And the galaxy learned too late that scamming Earth wasn't a crime. It was a creation event. The moment a species that survived by fixing the impossible was finally given the stars to repair.